Hi, thanks for tuning in to our Practical Nerds weekly podcast. I'm Shubh, and together with my partner and co host Patrick, we normally invest in founders in design, construction, renovation, and logistics technology. Many of our friends in the ecosystem wanted us to start a podcast on the built world, and in return, we decided to honor their request with a show about nothing at all. Patrick, this week it's not just you and me. I think it's probably not going to be about nothing.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you mentioned design in the intro because we
Ah, I
have
did.
Bastien Dola from Rayon with us. Hey, Bastien.
Hey, hi. Very
Hey,
nice to be
Bastien.
here and to be able to discuss about nothing with you guys.
I see you already catch the theme here. Very good. Super excited to have you on, Bastien. We have a full slate of topics. We're going to talk about you and your co-founder Stan, what brought you into Rayon, what Rayon is about, and how you and us actually think the design stack for designers, architects, everything that deals with designing spaces is going to change. So that's fantastic. But before we do that and talk about this rich slate, actually, why don't you tell us about Rayon and also the big news that happened this week?
Yeah, sure. Well, so first of all, Rayon, we are building a design tool for architecture, engineering, construction. So you could say it's like the Figma for architecture, but really it's more than that. It's trying to build the modern version of tool that people can use to design the built environment. And we've been doing that for almost 2 years now with my co-founder Stan. And the whole idea was how can we create something that serves the needs of the people designing and bringing all the modern technology with the cloud, internet, the real-time multiplayer aspects of modern tools for our industry. And we unveil the product this week, and we also announced that we have raised a seed round with you guys and Northzone, and so we were super happy about that. Great news.
Nice. I'm actually making myself a mental reminder to also ask Bastien later about the slate of angels that they have, because I think it's quite remarkable the quality of angels that you have, Bastien. Maybe we have some time later to also talk about them.
Yeah, sure.
But for us, this is a space we're super excited about. But let's maybe have a first chat about why this is actually economically relevant for this world. Because when people think about floor plans, I oftentimes still get this notion of, yeah, I mean a floor plan, I do it once in my life. But actually, when you deal with it, it covers so many parts of the economy, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And myself, I come from quite a specific background. I was a civil servant in the French government for a while, and I was working on public housing. I worked on urbanism. I worked on transportation. I worked in the Greater Paris area, urban development, and so forth.
Oh, wow.
So real estate, you could say, with a public policy angle to it. And people work on floor plan all day, and not just floor plan. You could say architecture drawings at large. To make a decision in urban planning, to make a decision whether to build or invest in a building, you need to look at floor plans because that's your program, that's everything you're going to do, and it's always in 2D, and because that's how you can. It's the right abstraction for many of the decisions, and it covers so much, a whole range of industries. It can go from event plannings to logistic to commercial real estate, of course, to housing, and that's I don't know one industry in real estate where you don't need to look at floor plans, most of the time. And to tell you the truth, at some point we had a call with an asset manager, that was buying building, and he told us, at least 40% of his time is spent looking at floor plans.
What?
Yeah.
Did you say 40? 40?
Yeah, 40%, because his job is basically to say, okay, am I going to buy this building? How can you decide that if you don't look at the floor plans? The capacity. Wow. The potential of the building, existing building, is it has to do with the shape. It has to do with the ingress. It has to do with the layout, the depth. So all of this is geometry. It's architecture. It's drawings. So you have to do that. And so for me, it's not so much about floor plan. It's about information that it's not viewable in just an Excel sheet. You have to view the geometry to understand. And it has to do about 2D. because we're talking about floor plans, but Rayon is a 2D tool that can work for floor plan, but also elevation, section, basically everything that is in 2D. And we think that's an abstraction that is very useful for a lot of problems. And we strongly believe that most professionals in the industry spend more time in 2D than 3D. And that's why we decided to do a 2D tool, which might seem a bit weird because everyone is into 3D. 3D seems like the future, right? But for us, we thought, talking with professionals and our own experience, we thought, no, 2D is actually where most of the work happens. And there's a huge potential here to do something maybe different than from the incumbent.
When I did floor plans over the course of my career, I mean, I'm not in any of those industries where I would do it on a daily basis, but even in my 15 years of a career, I probably have done 10 floor plans, office redesigns, events, office events, business events that you had to plan. Of course, personal life, when you renovate your house or your apartment, that's something I've done as well. You always go back to the floor plan. But man, my tool stack was pretty shitty back in the day. It was PowerPoint. I'll tell you that it was PowerPoint.
Yeah, one thing we discovered talking with a lot of people was that a lot of people were using PowerPoint. You were not alone, and professional too. People in big companies doing multi-million deals, and they would make a presentation to their board with a PowerPoint, and they would design small rectangles. So, okay, this is the area for the office. This is going to be. So yeah, because the existing tools are either for experts and are very complex, very powerful, but almost scary, very huge application. You need a powerful machine to handle them, or you have the generalist vector graphics tools, PowerPoint being one of them, and we feel there's a huge gap in between. That's really what we're trying to fill.
One of the things that fascinates me about Rayon, what you, Stan, and the team are cracking is also that it's such a workflow problem, because what the floor plans do is they inform decisions. You already mentioned probably one of the biggest decisions you can take about for floor plans is investment decisions, but there's renting, there is how to sell, for example, an event space, how to redesign office in order to optimize an additional 10 seats for so there's decisions that have to be taken, and so there's this workflow element really to the whole designing of spaces that I think more people need to be aware of. Is it's not just you do this design and then you put it in a cupboard, or it doesn't matter what you're doing. No, this actually drives a lot of business decisions. These floor plans, is that something or maybe you see it differently?
No, I agree. I would say that it a bit differently. It's first of all, we talk about floor plans, but it's really a question of data, and it's geometric data, but also other data that can be attached to the geometry, the price of a chair, the length of a wall, the materials. Kind of the aspect that we have in BIM, and I can talk about that because I think BIM is can be done in a light manner, and we talk about BIM-lite. So first of all, there is a lot of data, and you want to be able to exploit it better. But also, it's something that is shifting and moving all along the process. And one of the problems today, using a complex tool and then being forced to export your work as PDF, is that you lose that interactivity and the possibility to update your work all the time. Which is really bad because a project is living. You design it, but then you change stuff. There are many stakeholders, and then you try to build it. And when you're building it, you realize that things are not exactly like you imagined. You have to update, and then you maintain it and you change it. So this idea that is also behind BIM to have something like a digital twin of your spaces. We truly believe that. But we also believe that doing this with 3D and very complex workflow is it's too much. It's too much, and by having maybe the bar was set really much too high, and people just didn't do it. I remember talking with a big company that is an infrastructure provider. I won't name it, but they had spent maybe $5 million to create their digital twin. and that done it. Like somebody came with all the scanners and made their BIM model, but nobody did the updates. And 5 years later, it was in the bin. It was unusable because it was not up to date. And so the question is, how can you make something that is powerful but yet simple enough that people actually use it? And that's really what we're trying to do with a tool that is less powerful than, let's say, big software, powerful software like Revit, but actually usable enough that people will use it and will update it. And for us, it has to be simple. It has to be on the web, so you can just use it and do that. So that's really the vision.
Hold on there, Bastien. So actually, we're going to come to your fable for Figma, your love for Figma later. But actually, what you are saying right now is also there's a whole lot of Notion within Rayon, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you're putting geometry and certain metadata for all the objects that your users work with in a database, and you make it parsable, you make it automatable, etc. It's just that what you manipulate is not text, right? What you manipulate is the geometry attached to the database. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. What we're seeing is that if you look at the tools people are using, those are CAD tools that were only made to draw floor plans. And then there are other tools like Notion, like Miro, like Figma, and others that can be used to do general vector graphics. And we realize that more and more people actually want to have a mix of those. They want to draw a floor plan, and we're seeing our users do that exactly. They're doing floor plans with a lot of pictures, for example, a lot of images everywhere for mood boarding, to show the materials. They want to have links to resources on the web. They want to have quantities. So what actually they need to do is have the capability to express their intent as a designer, which is not just drawing lines. It's way more than that. It's adding a lot of data around the project. And they want to do it in one place, in this kind of infinite canvas experience that now we're used to. That makes a lot of sense. And then just share it with a link, and not having to do PDFs, and just then export them, send them an email, and then the person answering the email. And you lose track of all of this. So
I can already see Shub shopping for some real estate here because he really wants to get into using Rayon now. Is that right, Shub?
So actually, you know what? I'm still, my mind sort of paused at your comment earlier from, I believe, an ex-colleague of yours who you said spent 40% of his time looking at floor plans. I think I actually spent even more time than that at the beginning of my career, looking at 2D drawings. So I started my career in the oil and gas industry. So in that industry, we wouldn't call it floor plans per se, but it's essentially that. It's a 2D representation of what the top-down view looks like. We call it piping and instrumentation diagrams, right? I think I must have spent 50% of my time looking at them. That was part of my job. And I didn't realize I would be talking about that in this podcast. But there you go, I guess. So I was actually, my mind sort of fell into a rabbit hole of all the various messy things we used to do. So we used to produce one set of documents after the other, simply because there was no way for any of these tools or these systems to talk to each other, right? Which is going from one, I guess, sketching tool, for lack of a better description, although we also used to do it on PowerPoint at a preliminary stage. And then you would use like a series of tools that shall, software makers that shall not be named. We used to use their CAD solutions, right, to produce documents. It was a spectacular mess. I can tell you that. It was a spectacular mess 10, 15 years ago. I think it's no different today.
And Shub, just for everybody's context, right? I mean, you were working for one of the largest oil and gas engineering firms out there.
That's
this
right.
was not a French fry shop.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. And this is where I think, because if you go back to BIM, I think, the idea was really to solve those kind of problems by saying, okay, we're going to build a 3D model that's going to be shared throughout the whole life cycle of the building. And sometimes this can be done. But we also feel that in a lot of cases, the overhead of doing that, and also the constraint that comes with that problem is too much. So people just prefer the chaos and doing everything by hand rather than to have a BIM manager and a very complex workflow to do that. And we feel like a simpler, yet more kind of like a roadster, if you will, that you can use very easily to do simple stuff, but still have that capability to share the data to all the stakeholders and not just a file. Share it by reference and not by copy is very powerful. And we didn't invent anything, because we've been seeing firsthand how Figma, for example, applied that solution to the interface design. And we've seen also as how stuff like Google Doc or Notion did this for documentation and document processing. So for us, it was so obvious, that the same thing had to be done for our industry, and it was kind of the solution. Instead of sharing huge BIM IFC files of hundreds of megabytes in a kind of in a Dropbox, that could not be the future.
Okay, so Bastien, we couldn't do it any better. Actually, in our pre-brief, like 2 minutes before the show, Shub and I told you that, hey, we just go with the flow. We're not always the best to do the segues, but actually you did a perfect segue for us here, because we want to talk with you about your vision, your impressions of the future of the 2D and 3D design stack in, we like to call it the real world. And so one of the things that leading in maybe I want to comment on is, so I watched yesterday the video of a dear friend of ours, Martin Day from AEC magazine. And Martin Day had a conference in London over summer where, he's inviting really the smartest people from the industry, and he also invited Shub. So and so there was this panel, and Martin I think it was in introducing you, Shub, or maybe some introducing a question. He said, "Hey, it's funny whenever I see the fundamental guys and every tool that I get excited about." And he mentioned Snaptrude, he mentioned Rayon, he mentioned Speckle. It seems like fundamental is already invested in that. So why do I say that? I say that because now going into the second question, Shub and I have pretty strong opinions about the future of the 2D and 3D design stack. And let's hear yours, because maybe yours is actually even grander or different than ours. And then we'll make sure we tell you ours as well.
Hey, before you go, Bastien, just to layer in one question. So very similar sort of thought process. I was discussing with someone in the ecosystem, I think last week, give or take, about how we have all these new age solutions both in the 2D and 3D space, and then that person responded saying, "Hey, isn't this just another CAD software you're describing?" Right? I don't know if you've ever got a response like that from anyone you have spoken to. If
Sure.
yes, what do you tell them? Right?
So it's a very fair question, and I would say it's actually a question I love to have, because I think innovation is often more about changing the right thing than changing everything. And one of the questions we also have a lot is, you're never going to change the habits of an industry like the AEC. People are very conservative. Project last tens of years, so you can't change everything at once. And I also do agree about that. And I think the real question for me is, what are the right things to change? And so when people say it's just another CAD tool, I say, yes, sure. I mean, people have been drawing architecture drawing for millennia, and that's not going to change soon. But if you change the right ingredients, it's the same thing from going from Photoshop to design web site to Figma. It's a revolution, and people could have said, Figma, this isn't just, what is the difference between Figma and Sketch? It was pretty, like the same thing, feature-wise. But there was one thing they changed, which made the whole difference. It's browser-based and multiplayer, and that completely changed the paradigm. So we're trying to do the same thing, but we do have a lot of respect for the existing tools, because I think people. One of the problems we're going to face is people are not going to learn a new tool for the pleasure. So you need to be very in line with the standards of the industry as well.
Yeah.
Making sure people find their bearings quite fast. So making another CAD tool, but slightly different in a way that makes big changes is what we're trying to do. And coming back to 2D and 3D, so I think those are two things that are very different, but can be used one alongside each other. And previously, I worked a lot in 3D. I was doing 3D visualization on the web, 3D configurators, and one thing when you do a lot of 3D, one thing that you really know is that it's really hard to manipulate 3D. If I gave you a whole building in 3D, like in an IAC viewer, for example, and you want to see a specific room, it's almost impossible.
Yeah,
like
good luck.
you have to zoom in, then there's a wall in front of you, then you need to kind of have the right scope. It's an expert workflow. And many people in the real estate industry are not experts, and they're stakeholders, and they need to be able to see the data, and they will always come down to 2D, because in the end, our screen are flat, paper is flat, it's 2D, so it's much easier as an abstraction to represent that way, and it's not, that's an explanation for the reason that people work a lot in 2D. So we are convinced that it's going to remain in the future.
I wholeheartedly agree, and in fact, I mean that's one of the things that I find so exciting about your business potential is that you're addressing so many use cases and so many large economies, but the share of semi-professional users, by that I mean users that are professional in their business, but not necessarily professional in the art of 3D, because it's for them, it's not the core workflow, it's an enabling workflow to what they do elsewhere. The share of those semi-professional users in all the domains that you attack with Rayon, hard to run the math, I guess, but my hunch would be it's 80, 90, if not more %. So in fact, like that's a very exciting, ratio where you can now finally give them the right fidelity. You mentioned doing the right thing. In your context, I would actually call it right fidelity. I wrote on LinkedIn that PowerPoint is too low fidelity, and it doesn't offer, in that too low, it doesn't offer multiplayer, it doesn't offer reusability, it doesn't offer databases, none of that. Whereas 3D, think Revit, AutoCAD, or whatever is being used by these semi-professionals that are forced to then get into very high fidelity 3D tools, it's just too high. So what you're really building is for this 80, 90% of the users in all these different economies or parts of the economy, you're building the right fidelity tool. That's how I view it.
I mean, that's exactly also the way we view it. And also, I think going back to 3D, I think there are kind of two use cases for 3D. There is the first one, which is a building is in 3D. So we need to build in 3D to make sure that what we conceived and designed makes sense and there's no clash and conflict. And, this is the whole premise on which BIM has been built. And it makes sense. If you're building something very complex, you want to make sure the pipe doesn't go through the wall, or at least in the way you intended to. And so for very complex projects, it makes a lot of sense, and you need to do it that way. And this is not something we're targeting. But you also sometimes need 3D for a commercial and visualization purpose.
Right.
And we're talking about high fidelity, even higher, like photographic realistic 3D. Which is not even something you're going to have easily with the BIM model. And this is something I think is going to evolve in the future dramatically with the advancements we're seeing in AI. And one thing we're convinced of is that in the future, those kind of 3D usage is not going to be modeled. You're not going to create the mesh of every single object you need. You're going to prompt and generate it. So coming back to Rayon, we do feel that at some time in our roadmap, we're going to address this, but it's going to be via generation rather than modelization, the whole 3D with a complex 3D kernel and so forth that people ain't able to do because it's so hard.
But, in all of what you just said, Bastien, all I heard was AI. I think that's all that I needed to hear. So I think I'm like completely sold already.
Yeah, I had to say it at some point.
So tell us your true view.
I mean, my only complaint is, why did you mention AI only once? I mean, I think you need to keep track of how often we need to keep repeating AI.
I mean, within the 2D and 3D stack, I think my opinion specific, is that AI has to be embedded, but it's not necessarily a standalone function. And one of the key tenets, or one of the first principles, is that whatever AI will generate, both in a 2D and a 3D context, for the design of the real world, is going to have to be manipulated. And the manipulation will always be easier by the human in, the picks and shovels that you're building. Bastien is the multiplayer concurrent editing tool. And so the AI can, of course, assist in generating it in the first place and assist in manipulating it, but ultimately someone will want to move a wall by hand. It will still happen.
Yeah,
You won't do it via text commands. It's just not going to be the end all be all, in my opinion.
I agree. And my co-founder Stanislas and we met through AI because at the time we were thinking about how algorithm could generate floor plan. And in my previous company, we were actually using constraint programming, which was a very old and not sexy at all technology.
I remember doing that in my studies. That's been a while.
And Stan at the time was working on his thesis, which was super interesting, about using GAN to generate floor plans. And that's how we met. And we actually did in 2020 an exhibit about AI and architecture. It was really, you can have it on the internet, it's still there. It was super interesting. But the more we talk with people, the more we realize that AI was very far from their need, like their Maslow pyramid. It was okay, just give us a tool that works that we can collaborate with, and then maybe AI. And we thought, okay, so maybe we should work on that instead. And also, the thing about generative AI in particular, I always felt that designing is actually what the architect wants to do. He doesn't want to delegate that to a machine. That's his whole purpose. So when we think about AI, it's more how can we integrate tools in our design tool that will take away the shitty work, not the good work, the not interesting work, the repetitive work. So it's all about, for example, data ingesting, classification of floor plans, all floor plans that you want to convert to a new format, doing well. Stuff that it's not really sexy, but in the end, this is not something people want to do. Quality takeoffs is also a very good one, and we're seeing more and more people work on it. We think those are the topics where AI can really shine, not design in place of the architects, because first of all, the context is always going to be very complex.
Yeah.
The regulation itself is almost intractable, so you have to have a human do that. And also, I think it's the core of what they want to do.
Agreed. There's so now that we mention also the upgrading through AI that will come in Rayon embedded, but also more as part of the general stack. I think it's worth calling out again what you had highlighted earlier, Bastien, is the user, the persona. And so I almost feel compelled to draw like a 2x2 matrix, where on the one axis, it's the fidelity of the user, meaning there's a casual user, maybe that's Shub buying his next home and redesigning the place with Rayon on his own. And at the other end of the spectrum, there's a mechanical engineer or an aerospace engineer designing a turbine, right? So that's the one axis. And the other axis is what share of my job that I do is actually designing, whether it's 2D or 3D. And so whenever I think people think of the design stack, be it Figma or be it, Revit, SolidWorks, whatever, they think of the high fidelity, high recurring use cases, right? So like the top right one where the aerospace engineer does nothing but 100% of his time or her time, designing the turbine, which by the way, it never is. There's boring stuff like documentation. We've looked into that as well.
Yeah.
And so what is so fascinating is actually that the value of a high quality editing tool, multiplayer, concurrent, and then with embedded automation features is perhaps even higher for the users that are on the left-hand side and in the middle of the spectrum. So think of, let's give a few examples here for the guys listening in that you and Stan taught me. For example, a real estate broker. They do floor plans like how often? A couple times a week?
Yeah, maybe less. Sometimes it depends on their planning.
Exactly.
Sure.
In order to rent something out or in order to sell something. And on top of that, they have to do all these other things, right? They have to do documentation, they have to do contracts, they have to do handshakes and meeting people and acquiring new sites. So the actual floor planning part is very recurring, but it's not 100% of what they do, meaning it's even more tedious because you have less routine. So now the value of this stack that you're giving me it's even more appreciated because I cannot invest 10,000 or 100,000 hours to get expert in this very specific portion of my tasks, right? So that's, sorry, I don't, so I think that's very fascinating when you think about the persona and that you're addressing that seems so under-addressed to me.
Patrick, the matrix you described, actually, it seems to me a lot like what Canva's use case and expansion must have sounded like,
Oh,
or
interesting.
seemed like.
How so?
So even Canva, for those of you who are not familiar, I think the proposition is very much to simplify graphic design, animations, things of this sort. I mean, they obviously have professional enterprise users, but they also serve a very long tail of customers where the idea is to democratize where you may need designs, animations every now and then, and obviously the idea is not for you to spend a whole bunch of time doing that, but you want to make it look professional and so on. And it's interesting how that business has evolved into, I mean, frankly, a tremendously valuable business at this point. Who would have thought? Because I think we often treat, I think each of us, again, at some point of time, must have had some requirement to produce a piece of graphic design for some presentation or more. I guess judging by Patrick's laughs, maybe something interesting. But anyway, so moving on. But it's quite interesting how even that playbook perhaps also applies in the AEC world to a very large part of the audience.
Yeah. I mean, it's a question we had a lot with Stan at the beginning. Like, are we building a Canva or are we building a Figma? And in the one end, Canva is really made for more non-expert, I would say, and Figma for a bit more expert people. But I think one of the limits of the comparison is that in real estate, you have no notion of templating in a way because it's so much context driven. For example, Canva, I think a big part of their growth was to do with templates. You have millions of templates you can have. If you want to do a card for a wedding or anything, you will find a great template on Canva. That doesn't really work for real estate because you're not going to say, okay, I want a template for my office. We do have templates in Rayon, but it's a different meaning. It's more like a tool set that I'm going to use to create my plan. So we thought that it was more going to be a Figma thing in the sense that you need to compel to designers because even though they're is there a minority in the whole sum of people working in real estate and around them and the stakeholders, there's the one creating the data in the first place. And if you own that, then you solve the huge problem that we have in the industry, which is how can this data stay alive and not at some point lose its value because it's been transferred into PDFs and now the rest of the company works on PDFs. And every time they want to modify something, they have to call the design departments, they have to create a ticket. We had a discussion with a French company, and it was very interesting. Like every time there was a modification to be done in a space, it was a commercial real estate company. They would create a ticket in Asana to send to the design departments, so that the design department would move a chair 10 centimeters, something like that, something absurd.
You got to be kidding.
Yeah, it would take more time to actually create the ticket. Then, of course, the design departments didn't have time to do it. So you would have to send an email to, please, can you do it? It's urgent. So imagine the same thing where the design department has created all the model in Rayon. Then you can just open the model, drag, drop, it's done. And you don't waste time. And this is really, we think, the future, and it creates a lot of value for those companies.
Yeah. And not just that, I just want to call it out because you've reminded us how important the element of data is. So not just have they moved the chair, they've actually updated the data associated with the chair and the room in Rayon.
Exactly. And this is small problems, but they add up a lot. And this is the difference between an efficient company and a company that is wasting a lot of time through processes. And I remember one day I was going to rent an office, and I went to the quarter of a big broker to see offices, and we had a meeting with the business person that was in charge of the broker, and he could not open the file because he had an AutoCAD file. It just half an hour. I'm not kidding. Half an hour was gone. Just him, kind of sweating and trying to open the damn file. He could not open it. He had to ask the design department to open the file and do a PDF export. It took half an hour. It was absurd. And this is happening every day in the industry. And
I can identify with that. I think for those of our readers or viewers, listeners or viewers who may not identify, and Bastien would also love to understand from you, because I think a lot of people in the ecosystem assume, hey, obviously everything must be on the cloud, everything must be device agnostic, running from the browser, etc. Surely that must be the case, right? That must be the status quo as of today in the industry. Everything's on cloud and decentralized.
So everything in the cloud is quite different than everything in the browser, because that's a different set of problems. Like putting things in the cloud is quite easy. I mean, you just send the file to the cloud, it's in the cloud. And I think, a lot of existing software have just done that and say, okay, now we're in the cloud. Building an ubiquitous tool that can open in any browser and be performant and not just, a toy or something that is subpar compared to the desktop version, that's almost impossible to retrofit in an existing software. Like just today, I think today Photoshop went online. I think it was today. They announced it, the web version of Photoshop. And they said it took them, I think it was an 8 years work in progress to be able to do that. And I'm pretty sure it's a kind of watered down version. I didn't look at, maybe it's a some, but yeah, super hard to do. And, you need to build that from the ground up. And this is why, we're super excited with Rayon to be doing that, because it's a lot of technology as well, just not, and you have to build it right so it can work in any browser. And this is, even though we're also going to be building a native app for sure, like for our super users, they might want to have a native app. Mm-hmm. The fact that you can open a file through a single link is the most important thing, because this is the way you make it easy to share to anyone. They don't have to install a huge application. Nobody wants to do that. And the only thing that everyone has in common is a browser. It's becoming the new OS. So it really makes sense.
It really goes back to the workflow point that we discussed earlier, right? I mean, there's so many workflows and decisions associated with the updating here that you always have a reviewer. Just think of that. Typically, you have to have someone, whether it's your customer, like you in your anecdote, Bastien, like you wanted to rent a space. Okay, there's the workflow. So you need to review it and you need to make a decision based upon that. Exactly. Someone else, hey, please decide to move that chair or arrange this stage like this. There's always a workflow associated. It only works with like browser, multiplayer, concurrent technology.
And something that is very apparent to us, and Figma showed that, is there is a huge difference between having some kind of friction and no friction. Just changes completely the workflows. Let me give you an example. For example, in construction, often once you're doing design, you send your work to a consultant, for example, for the structure, to say, okay, this is going to fall down or this is going to be able to work. And we discuss with a lot of them. And most of them, what they do, they actually take the PDF, they print it, they take a pencil, they do like the small calculation and just they scan it and they send it back. They don't even bother to open the AutoCAD file, even if they have AutoCAD, because it's just too bothersome for them. They do that. I
have a confession to make. I also used to do that many years ago.
They still do it.
So in the sense, the default workflow, and by the way, it's interesting how there's even like a so-called ops reason, quality check reason as to why it's done, because you can vet like a trail of paper with signatures and whatnot. Yeah. Actually, why people are like, hey, you need to do these comments as markups on printouts.
But imagine now a different world where you can just have a link, you click it, it opens, you have the tools, and everything is saved to the cloud with what users has done what. You have like full version control. It takes like a few seconds and you're done. And that's, if you succeed in doing that, it changes something, because now okay, now this is faster actually than just taking a pencil and writing down, because I don't have to scan it back, send the email, just done. And if you succeed in doing that, and people will say, maybe I'm going to change my ways because this is actually less work for me.
Okay, so this is now super specific, but I find this, again, another relevant point also about the product and the technology, the engineering that you, Stan, the entire team have actually invested in Rayon. So Figma, for a very, very long time, didn't have a true version history. It was actually time snapshots of the state. How is that in Rayon solved?
Yeah, so it's something we thought about from the beginning, and so the way it works is that to save the data in real time to the backend, we do it less often than Figma. Figma is really a multiplayer tool, almost a game. It saves every milliseconds. We do actually commit when people finish an action that has a sense in terms of the user, and that way we have an history of all those commits, and we're very close to a Git-like system where you get your file is actually a history of commits, and you can go back in time if you undo or redo the different commits. And so you have like full control over the whole history, where you can see exactly what has been done from the get-go, which also means that you're going to be able to time travel, like replay the whole design of your model step by step, see everyone does everything. You will also be able to branch out, create different commits on a different branch, and then merge it and solve the eventual conflict that can arise. So have full control, and this is really key because we talk to a lot of people in the industry, and this is so important because it's serious work. You're actually going to build something. There is responsibilities, so you need to know what has been done by whom. You need to have full control over your history. So we're very focused on that as well.
I want to make sure, Bastien, that people understand the gravity of what you're saying with the following example. So in Figma version history, I'm not sure if they changed it recently, but for the longest time was not attached to a single object. Meaning, if I split a box in two, I actually don't think I can do that in Figma, but just as an example, it would not allow me to trace back the specific line or the specific split. It would allow me the time snapshots. So in Rayon, if I manipulate a wall and split it in two, I can actually trace back to the original wall because you're actually splitting on that granular atomic object level. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And you will be able to undo it, and you will be able to go back. And for example, if you a simpler example would be, okay, at some point somebody has deleted something that I wanted to modify and I wanted to keep. You are also going to be able to go back and say, okay, this modification, I want it undone without disrupting the rest of the versioning, so you can get back things that have been deleted. And so, to be clear, it's not all available in the software. We have all the building blocks there. Now we need to think about something that is quite hard, is what kind of UI we want to be able, so that it's not super complicated and you're not overwhelmed with the data, but you are able to do what you want, which is have control over your models in time.
I think I actually at some point did because you make the UI point, at some in my articles earlier this year, I actually had the fun of looking at one of the standard softwares for 3D design, a software that shall not be named. And I looked at how many buttons and functions it had. I have to go back. It was like north of 200 buttons and functions to the 10,000 hours of training that you need. Like, your philosophy is different, isn't it? It should be easy and enjoyable.
Yeah, sure. I think we strongly believe that on the tenets of design, where you should have like a progressive disclosure of the functionalities, and people at the beginning might think the software is simplistic, but in fact, when they start to use it and go deeper, they realize there is a lot of depth. So that's really how we try to think about it, because we want to build something that can be used by a non-expert, but also can go a deep and long way for experts. So yeah, it's really hard to do. You have to admit.
Nice.
It's not easy. It's not an easy problem.
So, I mean, this is fascinating, and there's so much depth to this conversation. And I can only imagine, you and Stan now doing this for almost 2 years, after careers in Stan's case we haven't even mentioned, but he used to be with Spacemaker. Before that, he was with Flux. So and he's a trained architect. And so you had these accomplished careers, and now you settle for this very complex opportunity. Like, what in your guys' background made you do this?
Yeah. So I won't speak on behalf of Stan, but in my case, I think if I can give you the real reason or the political reason.
We'll
No,
take both.
yeah, no. I mean, to be honest, since I was a kid, I always loved to use design tool. I remember when I was in high school and I was working in 3ds Max, doing 3D design, and I was like,
That's
for
heavy.
me, yeah, but it was incredible. That a computer could do that. I thought it was amazing. And then later on, I was also using Flash. I was using Blender. Then I was using, and I was always fascinated by the care people put into design tools and just, the thought to be able to enable creativity. And it has always been my dream to design a tool like this. So in the end, this is really what motivates me, I have to say, is to be able to contribute to a new tool that is really, full of care and design, and that really changes the way people do things. That's actually what I love. I love, nitpicking about interaction, performance, understanding how we can do that. That's really what motivates me in
That
the
is
day to
super
day.
cool.
Yeah. But of course, it's also super interesting to create a company, and but I think in the end, it's all about empowering people that create. And something that is super exciting right now for us is to see what people are starting to do in Rayon. There are floor plans and drawings. We're like amazed that actually people are doing this, and
Oh, that's not my project. That must be someone
yeah.
else's.
No, I mean, that's really amazing when you see somebody do something beautiful in your editor. You're like, wow, I didn't think people would do stuff like that so fast, and you're always very, impressed by the creativity of people. And also, we're seeing people doing that throughout the world. So it's also super exciting to do a global software, and super interesting.
But it's almost only half of the answer of the complexity that you're dealing with. I mean, there's the technical and engineering complexity of what you're building, and then you're doing it in parts of the economy, not just real estate, not just construction. We've touched upon that. So it's many different real economies that have complexities in itself. So what in your background made you want to do this for this economy?
Oh yes, I think this is kind of this is just a product of life choices that happen in my life for different reasons. I started actually working at NASA at the end of my studies. So something completely different. I was doing data analysis on an instrument around Mars. And then I came back to France and I became a civil servant, and I was, very interested by the problems that we had in France in the projects in poor neighborhoods. In 2005, we had riots that were very important in France, and I thought, this is what went wrong. How can we improve that? And I wanted to work in that, and so I did this for almost 10 years, and it turns out I became involved in real estate in a way, building public housing, urbanism, thinking about neighborhoods, thinking about city planning and transportation. And
you oversaw a large budget. You told me the number once.
yeah. I mean, it's very funny for me because I'm 40 years old, almost 41, and I feel like a 20 years old because I'm for now almost 7 years I had a completely new career. I completely changed, and I think most of my colleagues from the past must think that I'm crazy to do that because I had a career. I could have kept going as a civil servant. And yeah. But at some point you have to think about what motivates you on a day-to-day basis, and I have absolutely no regrets. I think I really found my calling doing what I do today, and
Nice.
this is a really really cool.
That is super awesome.
In one of our calls, you told me, hey, this is plan A. I don't have plan B. Like that's the founder mindset you want, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it took me a long time, almost 10 years, to realize what I wanted to do with my life and what matters and what did not. So yeah, and I'm there now. It took a long time. Maybe some people can do it faster than me, but never late than never.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You and I were born in the same year. Not quite as colorful as like the change you did, but it's a little bit how I feel like having met Shub and Adam and doing fundamental like 5 years ago. I had no clue I would be here. So, but I think
Yeah.
what you're doing is a bit cooler. So I'll
No,
give you that. But
that's how you stay young.
yeah, I like to think so. I think I have to think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I truly believe it.
As long as it works for you, Patrick.
you know. But so I made a note earlier that we also, if we had some time, maybe chat about the the roster of angels that you were able to excite. What can you tell us about them? I think it's a remarkable group of people.
Yeah, it's really amazing. It's something I didn't realize before doing this. And if you had told me a few years ago that we would have all these people around us, I would not have believed it. So at the pre-seed round already, we had some amazing angels with us. We had Thibaut from eFounders, so he's an amazing guy. We had great people. We had Cal Parrish as well. We had amazing people. But here at the seed round, I mean, I won't cite them all, but first of all, one that I found absolutely amazing is Rasmus Andersen. So it's I don't know if he's ever going to listen to this, but it's for those who don't know him, he's really a fascinating guy. He was at Spotify, then he went at Facebook, at Figma. He did, he's quite young, but he has accomplished so much. And I was, a follower of him on Twitter, and I always thought it was so interesting because he was like a Renaissance man doing design, doing heavy computer science, even though he has done no studies in both of those fields. I think he studied photography. So really fascinating. And I reached out to him, and he was super interested, and he became an angel, and I'm super happy with that. He's been super supportive. But we also had Norman Foster came as an angel. So like that was
Sir Norman Foster, according to Wikipedia.
Of course, yeah, and Lord Foster, so that's so amazing. We talked with him. It was once again so inspiring. He's not a young person, but he's so young of mind, and what he has done and accomplished is just amazing. So we were super happy about that.
And I think a huge validation. I mean, someone with his pedigree, the decades of achievement in architecture, building one of the most accomplished architecture practices, to actually say, hey, this is the future. This is what I want to be a part of.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was, and also, he had never done angel investing before.
First time.
Yeah, it was the first time.
Wow.
So and I think Rasmus doesn't do much angel investing as well. So we were super privileged to have them. And we also have Adam Wiggins, was one of the co-founder of Heroku, but also has thought a lot about real-time tool, building Muse. So amazing guy as well. Super interesting. We're super happy about this setup, and it's
Hey, one question I have for you, on behalf of, I guess, many founders who are starting off, right? A lot of them might be listening to this and thinking, hey, I don't know how to get in front of all these amazing people as angels. I wish I had all the means and the tactics or the connections and so on and so forth. So what would your advice be to them?
So yeah, that's a very good question. The one thing, there is one quote I love, which is like 80% of success is just showing up.
That's how Shub got here.
Yeah, but I truly believe it. I mean, I think you just need to do it, and if you reach out to people, you will realize that they are often willing to help, and those angels, because myself, I had no connection whatsoever with the architecture. I had no connection before my previous company with the tech world, absolutely none. So I almost started from a blank slate. And the way to do it is basically just to reach out to people, try to put out interesting content, try to have good ideas, and you will be surprised. You will really be surprised. And I think people are, if you work on something that you're passionate about, you will find like-minded people that will like-minded people that will be passionate also about what you're doing, and there's a lot of goodwill there. It's So just do that, I think, and it works.
If I can speak about you, Bastien, in answering that question, and Stan, actually. So maybe two things, Shub, to your question. One, get a co-founder that is what we call in German a soul catcher, someone that is able to catch souls. I think that's Stan as well. Like, that's one of his many qualities. He's just captivating. And the other one is, I think you guys are genuine. You're not boastful. You're not, trying to, I don't know. Yeah,
I mean,
that's one word for not them, but just be genuine, right? About
Exactly.
the vision, but also the life experiences, the hardships, etc. Every time I talk to you guys, it feels just genuine.
Yeah, I think if you're, I think I'm a nerd, so it's nice, and nerds kind of want to talk about nerdy thing together,
Right.
and if you do that and focus on the on what you're building and not just the fluff, it just is better, I think. Yeah.
Nice.
But
That's
it took
great.
me a long time to understand that. When I was younger, I was more, I think, interested in status and stuff like that. But when you grow older and you have kids, you realize that life is short. It doesn't really matter. Status doesn't matter.
I tell myself that you are very young, Bastien.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, as long as it works for you, Patrick. As long as it works.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. I think this has been fascinating. We have to have you back on, maybe hearing after a few hours. Hey, sorry, we can't let you go without a few numbers about Rayon. Can you share some numbers with us?
Oh, what can I share? I don't know. Yeah,
Only lies and false stuff.
Yeah. So no, what I can. Okay, so I have a lot of numbers to give. I think the numbers. So first of all, I will say the number 13, which is the number of employees we have. So we try to stay small. We want to stay a small company in terms of headcount for a while. So that's the first metric I can tell you, and I can also say 25,000, which is the number of signups we had this month.
Nice.
Which is nice.
That is nice.
That is amazing.
Yeah, so we're super happy about that, and we're just getting started. We launched the app in June, so
amazing, Bastien. I mean, having you on is a pleasure, but much more importantly, thanks for partnering with us. Thanks for having us on your ride, on your journey. We couldn't be more excited of helping you guys build this company into a massive, not just business, but the tool that people desire. Because as we learned today, there's many people that this touches, many parts of the economy that Rayon touches, and they don't have the time to invest 10,000 hours into a shitty tool from San Francisco. They need a better stack, right? So thanks for having us along for the ride. It really is a pleasure. I can't wait for the next years with you guys.
And thanks a lot for your support, Patrick.
That's a pleasure.
Important. Yeah, super important to us.
Great. I'll give you a number, 1983. That's our number, Bastien.
Yeah. So I'm older than you.
You're a little.
As long as it works for the two of you. Good for the two of you.
Shub is 85. So, he's a pup.
Yeah.
That's right. Bastien, thanks so much.
I'm also involved in the journey, so also tremendously excited that we're with you in our capacity.
And super happy to have finally met you, Shub.
Likewise.
That feeling doesn't last.
As Patrick knows very well.
No, thanks for the time, Bastien, and we'll see you hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See you guys.